up a little bit, and I got so I could run them a little bit. And so, but this was, I called him Rufus, see.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it puts me in mind of little Rufus. And he went into his mother's bedroom and he said, Mommy, he said, tell me a story. He says, I can't sleep. He said, I want a bedtime story. And she looked up at the clock and it was about 2:30, and she says, honey, she says, wait just a few minutes. She says, Daddy will be home. You'll tell both of us a good story. And so that's what this is with him, see. And then there was the old horse. I call it the gray mare, you know. And I run him. And then here's the girlfriend that he fell in love with. She got the stick out. Old Rufus. Of course, I put this program on and talk all the time on dancing them, except when I'm playing the harmonica. By being able to play the harmonica, you can time them to make him stomp or shuffle his feet, see, and you know just what he's going to do, because everything is inside, see, working. So you know exactly when he's going to do everything, right to the precise, and of course that makes the dancing, right, absolutely in perfect timing.
Could you give us just a brief demonstration of
Well,
that?
I could, I'd have to set up to do that. You have to.
That would take a while.
Well, I'd have to get the chair and put it in and
Well, maybe before we get through, you could.
Huh?
Maybe one of the last things before we get through, you could.
Yeah, well, it isn't that much of a proposition, you know, but that was the best part of my entertainment, as a matter of fact.
People really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. I've been up to Old Forge, you know, and they enjoyed it very much up to Old Forge. I've been there. I was there 3 nights running at Old Forge, and they had different crowds, see, and so you could put the same show on because you had a different crowd. See? That makes it easy when you don't have to put a different show on. Sometimes you have to vary your shows or your jokes or your stories or songs or whatever.
Well, you used to write a lot of poetry, too.
Yes, I wrote quite a few poems. That's one thing that burns my heart. I had over 100 poems and they burned up. And there's 1 or 2 that I can think of that I'd give a world for that one poem. Boy, it was a nice poem. I called it Beauty. And I can't remember how the thing went, and I loved it so. But
Ambrose Bailey has got some of your poems on tape. Maybe that one's on it.
he might have. No, I don't think well, I have read it. Now, they might have it in Boonville on tape, you know, at the school. I read for 4 classes. That's 160 minutes of poetry. And well, there was a little musical program during the time on the first ones, but most of it was poetry reading. And of course, old boy Pete, he wanted me to get him published. He's been after me ever since he heard him, but I'm just getting around to it now, and so that they will be published.
Are you self-publishing? Self-publishing?
Up there in Boonville, yeah.
You're paying publishing yourself.
Well, yeah. Oh, yes. I'm going to have it done in Boonville there, and out to the Herald they do it, you know. Oh, it's not going to be much of a book, you know.
Well, don't put it down. A lot of people will like it.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a poet. I don't figure I'm a poet. I just sit and write for pastime. But I do criticize the poets. I do criticize them. And I'll tell you why. Now we'll take Longfellow. He was 17 years dean of Harvard College. And he studied over across New York and Switzerland and everywhere, and he's got a doctorate degree from about every college over there and in here. And then he starts writing poetry. Well, he can use a word that I never heard of, you know, and I'd say, well, what does that word mean? I look at it, and I never heard that word. Well, I get a dictionary. Of course, I don't know much anyway, but I get the dictionary, and I start looking. Well, finally I find that word, and here's about 5 or 6 meanings to it. And then you begin reading his poem, and you try to figure out which one of these things he means. And by the time you get this figured out, you throw the poem away because it doesn't matter. You can't put it together right anyway. What are you thinking? Then the other thing he makes a mistake on is, and he's quite a hand for that, he refers to something. Now, I'd say, for a good example, I could write a poem on the Black River Canal, and you would like it. Oh, it'd be great. What would the people in Idaho know about the Black River Canal? They wouldn't have the slightest idea what I'm trying to bring out. See, you got to have something that the moon, the stars, the mountains, the lakes, and the trees, and everything that they understand. See, the stones or anything like that, they understand this. But to pick out something, and he'd be writing along, he'll say it's like the mouse on something in one of his poems. And I don't know where it come from. I can't even find where the mouse come from, because I don't know. And then another, Bob Burns, I think it was writing, and he said that there come an awful fight. He said somebody said boiling waters, and I said, well, why should there be a fight over that? So you got to do some researching, see, in order to find out. What boiling water was a song that was sung in the Confederate Army in the North and the South when they're fighting, see? And it belonged to one or the other, the North or the South, and when the guys started whistling it or singing it, the other ones from the South or North, they took over, and there was a fight on. So, well, I can see now what there was to it, but you have to look it up to find out. See, but I don't like that. When you're listening to poetry, it should be free and easy, every word the same. You know, so something you can understand. That's the way I write my poetry. Of course, it's not poetry; it's writing, just writing.
Writing and rhyme.
Yeah, writing and rhyme.
Rhyme and rhythm.
It's gotta have them both, rhyme and rhythm. In order to be, well now, Royal said, you know, he said, I've heard a lot about your poetry. And he said, this is the first time that I've ever happened to be where that you were reading poetry. And I want to say one thing, that is poetry. Said Bob Royal. But it's, I'd say it's writing, it's not really poetry. But I enjoy it, you know.
What happened to the rest of your family? You mentioned you and Howard.
Well, Bill and I worked together in the logging, and of course, the rest of the family, Gene, he was a mail clerk eventually, a clerk in charge down Utica Terminal. He was in the mail service, and he used to ride. In the beginning, he rode down the trains from Watertown to Utica, back and forth, and they started the mail on the train, see? And that was his job, but then he got stationed in Utica, and he became the clerk in charge. There was 10, 12 under him, see? But he was there, see? And then Lawrence, he was in the service, so was Gene in the service. And Lawrence got wounded in the service, and Lawrence, he was driving out a freight line for quite a while, and then finally he got in the magazine, married a woman that was in the magazine business in Augsburg, and he lived up there. And of course, there was Tom. Tom, he had a bad heart, and he died quite young from his heart gave out. He had a stroke, you know, and eventually that gave out. And, with it there. I got just 3 sisters left, the girls, and they're all alive. There's Ellen Bullock in Port Leyden, and she lives up above the cannon there. And then there's Gertie down to Orleans Four Corners, and she runs a store there, which of course I'd like to sell, because she would too, you know. She's getting too old to run it, and she'd like to sell the store, but nobody's got any money to buy it. And it's really a nice setup. It's right in near Camp Drum, you know, right where everything is happening. You know, it's going to be worth double what it is today, but she can't get anybody to buy it. I've tried my best to sell it. I can't move it. And then Irene is living in Florida, and she married Frank Palmer, and he was a teacher at one time, and I guess I thought he taught in Port Leyden, but I know that he was down in the North Syracuse district. That's where he retired from, and he taught in North Syracuse. And Dr. Hammond in Boonville was over him. He was under Dr. Hammond. But Frank, he wasn't teaching. He was just a supervisor and hiring and firing the teachers and down. He didn't do any teaching himself, but he just got tired of it, and so he quit. And he bought a home in Florida. They lived down there. And of course they called me up, and at Christmas time they go out and pick oranges off the trees, and I said, "You're just rubbing it in." Yeah.
But you wouldn't trade with them, would you?
No, I wouldn't trade. I don't go down there. The boys, Irene would like to have me come down, but I don't go down. It's first part is it's 2-party drive. The next thing is I wouldn't fly, because that's
It's awful hard on the arms, going that far.
It's a long way. Although I have driven over 800 miles in one day, that's a lot of driving.
I know.
Yeah, I drove up to Perrysville and back, and then I come back to Port Leyden. I took June to Fredonia. She was going to college in Fredonia. But she's a music teacher. I'm very proud of all my children. June is a music teacher in West Virginia, in Charleston. They live in South Charleston. It's right up on the hill above Charleston. And she has a studio, and she teaches right in her own home. But she teaches this Suzuki method. It's something new. It's Japanese form of teaching. And she, during the summer, she flies all over. They pay, buy her tickets and her room and everything, and they give her a big salary besides. She gets a big thing out of that. And she goes all over. She's a week in Canada. She'll come now about the 5th of July, and she'll spend a week up in Kingston. She has every year. And then she teaches up there, see, and while she's all over to Texas, she goes to Milwaukee and out to California, all over. They're liable to ship her anywhere, see, during the summer, and then she comes back, she's teaching. And she is the leading flute player in the Charleston Symphony Orchestra.
Oh.
That is quite an accomplishment.
She played flute in the Port Leyden School Band, didn't she?
Yeah, she majored in flute. I give her 9 years on the piano, but she majored in flute. And she, of course, she can play piano like nobody's business, but flute is what she majored in. Then she teaches flute and piano. But it's quite a setup, for her. I'm pretty proud of her. Of course, I'm proud of Mike too, and the same with David. I got 3 wonderful. They don't smoke nor drink or dope or anything. They're right down to earth. That's what I like.
Are your sons near you? Do your sons live near here?
Well, Mike does. He lives at Tayberg. Mike, right now, I think is in California. I'd say he's in California right this minute. He left 7 o'clock this morning, and he flew to Boston, and then he gets on an airliner there, and zingo right through to California. So he must about pretty well be there now.
Mm-hmm.
What's he do?
He's a computer for the government. He worked for the government, and at Griffiths Air Base. He has an office there, and they send him around to get contracts. See, and he goes into the companies and he gets their contract business for that outfit there. See,
Mm-hmm.
and they send him to Hawaii. Boy, he didn't want to go. Oh man, he needs to go. But he has to go. He likes to be home, but he'd rather be home than anywhere. But he had to go. The other guy that might have went, him and his wife had planned a trip up in the mountains, so they had that all planned. So Mike had to go, and he didn't want to go. Boy, he said, "I wish I didn't have to go." But he goes, they don't. Usually about a week,
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, what about David? Where is he now?
David is in Atlanta, Georgia now. He's got a new job. He hasn't been on that too long, probably a year, I guess, or less than a year. What happened to David, he was 17 years into Texaco Oil Company, and he had a good job there. He had men under him, and he had, I guess, charge of the blending of the gasoline,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. It was kind of an office job, and everything is going fine. Well, Texaco sold out. And the boss said to him, the guy that bought it, said, "Show this guy what you do." So David had to take him around and show him everything about the job. And when he got done, the boss said, "Well, now this is my son," he said, "and he wants your job." So he said, "I guess we won't be needing you anymore."
Oh, that was lovely.
17 years. So they give him, of course, a layoff, and he gets unemployment, and I guess they give him money besides, but he had to hike right out and look for another job. And so he started driving and looking and talking, and finally he landed up in Atlanta. He liked his job there. But
What kind of work is he in now then?
these Band-Aids that have the paper on them,
Mm-hmm.
well, his company makes those things, and they all fancy papers like that, special things,
Mm-hmm.
It's a paper company of some sort, but not like Gould paper.
No, he's kind of a chemist or whatever, working and developing these things in labs? Or?
Well, no, he's not. He hasn't worked up to that, but he's got a good job there now.
Well, I thought maybe with the gasoline blending and so forth, it might have tied in.
No, they didn't. They seemed to have everything there, but he went to work there, and he said to them after a while, he said, "Well, now I like the job, I like the place and all that," but he said, I'm going to give you a notice that I'm going to be looking for another job. He said, because this isn't money enough to carry me through. It isn't what I'm used to, see. And so, they said, "You ain't going to be looking for another job. We'll just up your wages." So they didn't want to lose him, see. And because he was a good man for the company, He is a good man for the company, there's no question of it. But he says it's, I don't know, 6 or 8 of them under him or something like that. He's got a good job there. But he had a good job where he was. He was making around 40,000, and that was a good job.
Mm-hmm. Well, Charlie, you've told us about your children, and you've told us about your brothers and sisters. Tell us a little about your parents.
Well, about my parents, my dad was an Irishman, and my mother was a Frenchman, half French. And so I'm half French and half Irish and half wet, And mother spoke very good French, and she was a tremendous cook and everything, and a provider. There never was a woman that could outdo her, and I'll guarantee you on that. Boy, she could. She raised those children, and she used to do the washing on the washboard.
Mm-hmm.
That's before any washing machines or anything. And to rub back, and remember hearing her scrubbing, and she'd have the Phelps soap, and then she made soft soap too, you know, with ashes and stuff like that. I can remember her making soft soap. And we would, in the fall, we'd butcher off a cow, usually, and probably a couple of pigs or so. And there was no refrigerators, and yet she never lost a pound of meat. Boy, she'd can that meat, you know, and everything, and so tasty. Everything that she cooked was right out of this world. Of course, you see, Mother started cooking when she was 12 years old. She cooked in a lumber camp for 35 men. That's where she started. And her and her sister, the two little kids, is all it was, and she did the cooking, and she learned to cook. From that time on, she was, and there was nothing, you know, for baking a barrel of bread. That's the way she'd bake it. Throw it in a barrel, and a whole barrel full of it, you know. And, but see, I don't recall ever cooking for these men, but they tell me of it, see, that she did. And because that was in the lumber camp, Dad, he put up timber, see, and stuff. Back then, they was in the softwood, but he did farm it too, you know. But he was, of course, Dad was quite a worker. He was a very good carpenter, a fast carpenter. Oh man, he could do anything and just blink and it was done. It wasn't that great, that very fine finishing work. It was just a little on the rougher side, but he'd do it, you know, and it looked nice when he would do anything. And he was a good blacksmith. Anything would break down, why he could, and the slaves, you know, if they need repairing or anything needs repairing, Dad could do that, nice and handy. And of course, when we was growing up, we did farm it some. I remember potatoes and oats and things like that. We'd be planting, and I can remember riding the seed drills, you know, and for planting the oats. But the deer flies and horse flies is about that long, you know. They almost carried the horse away, and they'd take a bite. Boy, there was a lot of flies up here, you know, on the mountains. That's where the flies are. And we used to feel so sorry. The blood would be running out of the horses' necks, and they'd be stomping, and just like they're in the bee's nest, you know. It's an awful thing. But I guess that was another thing that kind of turned us off. We hated to see the animals suffer, so, you know, during the plowing. Our ground, I did mention that it was quite stony. And one time one of the Beck boys come along here. I'm not just sure. I think it was Harry. Beck came along here. And he was driving by, and I was plowing that field right over there. And right where I stopped, there was for about 40 feet, there wasn't a stone. There was nothing. It was always just as smooth as could be. And I happened to stop right at the head end, opposite that gate. And because he stopped and I stopped. And so he said to me, "Boy," he said, "would you mind if I plowed once around?" No, I said, "I wouldn't mind." I said, so, "Boy," he said, "I haven't plowed in years. I just would like to go once around." So he got in there and he said, get up," he said to the horses. And the horses, they started like this. He said, "Get up." And the horse, he said, "Is that as fast as they going?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh," he said, "I couldn't go. They'd make me so nervous." He said, "I couldn't go back of them horses all day."
Until he hit the first stone.
And so, well, I said, "They're going fast enough." I said, "I'd train them, you know." And then when they'd hit a stone, they'd stop, see? And if I said back, I'd speak to them easy, they'd back up. And the horses, it was trained, you know, for me. Well, he got in there and I heard him hit one stone, and I began to laugh. He said, "What you laughing at?" And I said, "Nothing," I said. And he went a little ways, and the first thing, bang. And then, whoop, he pulls the plow back and he puts it in the ground, and bang, and the plow goes out of the ground. And I counted with myself once around 36 times that it throwed the plow out of the ground. is saying nothing about the rocks that you rock around. You know, you hit rocks, but you go run. But 36 times it started to plow right out, so I had to put it back in again around the field. Why, when he got halfway around, you could run his shirt. and he got around, he said, I wouldn't plow that ground if you give it to me. He said, never again would I go there. And he lost 3 days in the mill. He had a kink in his back.
Oh.
he got a kink in the back out of it. It was quite a deal, but that ground is so tremendously stony. You can't do anything with it. But it does grow awful nice potatoes and stuff like that. Outstanding. The potatoes are the most tastiest thing. Boy, they're nice potatoes.
Do you have any trouble when you're picking up potatoes to know if they're stones or potatoes?
Well, you would have unless you look pretty close. Boy, I'm telling you that they that's awful stony. Oh man, oh man. And we never cared to work. I never cared to farm it because it was so darn stony, you know. If it had been good farming land, we'd probably farmed it. See, but I like the logging better. And Bill, you know, we used to grow potatoes, but we'd have to take time off from logging to bug them, you know, and then we'd have to set them, we'd have to hill them, you know, and you'd cultivate and you'd hill and everything, and the time you got done, those potatoes cost you a fortune. I said, if we get out one load of logs, I said, in that length of time, we'd buy all the potatoes we could ever eat.
Sure.
So,
You used a lot more potatoes in those days, probably, didn't you?
oh yeah, yeah. Well, potatoes was one of our main diets. We had meat and potatoes and everything. Of course, Mother being such a good cook, why she kept us right up and everything. And of course, we had a big garden, you know, and we'd have cucumbers and lettuce and squash and rutabagas and everything in the garden out there. We had a big garden, and of course Dad would take care of the garden mostly when we was working. So it made a good setup in there.
Your dad and mother lived here till they died?
Yeah, they lived here. Mother lived to be 100 and a half. And she died here in the old house there. And Dad did too. They both of them died here.
How old was your dad when he died?
71. Yeah, he's, well, you see, he could have been, today he'd have been a very wealthy man if he was like they are today, with no conscience and all. He went to the doctor, see, and he was having trouble, and he went to the doctor, and it was the doctor's own fault, you know, and then that developed into cancer, and he died from cancer, but of course he naturally would, because, you know, you get injured there, why it's bad. And he could sue him for malpractice, you know, and collecting the way they do it today.
But he wouldn't have anyway.
No, he wouldn't have anyway. No, we wouldn't. That's one thing we would never do. Something like that.
Didn't believe in it.
No, you don't believe in that. I don't know. We always believed in honesty. Yeah. I always figured that was the only way to be. And that's the way we grew up. It's there's a lot of things, you know, that today that they think all there is to it is money, but money isn't the answer to everything. No matter, now Howard Hughes, he has quite a bit, but he ain't helping the many today.
No.
I always said I never want to be the richest man in the cemetery. No, it wouldn't do you much good.
Not much.
No, money is not a concern at all.
How much faster did you feel that you were working as far as the amount of footage you got out in a day with a chainsaw than what you could with a crosscut?
Well, you'd get out more with a chainsaw, actually, than you would.
Because some of these men were awful good with a crosscut.
Yeah, we had two fellows that, of course, it was right up on a skidway. But there was two fellows we had that worked here. And they blocked 13 cord of stove wood in one day. Now that's a dang lot of stove wood. 13 cord in one day they blocked with a crosscut saw. But if a saw cuts good, and that's one thing I could praise myself on, that I could really make a saw cut. And if it really cut good, we didn't mind, sawing it off there. But the chainsaw is faster because one man runs it, the other guy can do something else. He can be skidding it, see? With the other ones, you got to take so you run the crosscut, and then you both got to stop for the skidding, see? So you can get out more stuff, with a chainsaw a good deal.
Well, I always figured so, and yet when I see what some of these people have cut with crosscuts, it makes you wonder.
Well, Danny Fowler, he bought an old saw from us when we was in the chainsaw business. It was, the saw was no good, see, and of course he was just trying to get by with it. And he's quite a hand of monkey with something like that. His dad and his uncle was sawing with a buck saw. Danny says the saw would stop. See, it was an old Hornet, and it would stop, and he says, then I'd crank, and I'd crank, and I'd crank, and he says, man, would they make me mad. He said, they'd grab, the minute that stopped, they'd grab those old buck saws, he says, and zing, zing, and the block would be dropping off, and zing, zing, and another block, and he said, here I am a-cranking. Boy, he said, once I get it going, then I could catch up with them. But he said, they'd make me mad to see them blocks dropping off and me cranking. Tickled me with Danny. No, Dad was a good worker, a very good worker. You see, when we talk about the old times, and then we talk about the new times, Charlie Chamber, he's the president out there in the Lincoln Bank in Boonville, he said to me, Charlie, he said, you keep on talking about the good old days, the good old days. He said, today is the good old days, he says. And you talk about, he said, tell me something, how many people had a savings account in the good old days? Oh, Charlie, I said, we didn't have no savings account. I said, I said, we traded wood for groceries, I said, and we traded potatoes, I said, and to get groceries, anything we had. I said, we grew stuff in the garden, we sold cucumbers, we sold a little milk and things like that to get by. I said, we didn't have nothing. I said, well, that's just it. He said, that's just it. Well, I said, Charlie, now let's take my side of the story. I said, my dad got $1 a day. But I said he was an awful good man. The going price was 50 cents a day for a man. That's all they paid, was 50 cents. And we had old books to prove that burned up, where they'd pay him just 50 cents a day. But Dad got $1 a day because he was a good man. And now I said, I can bring you out a 1903 New York Globe paper, because I had a suitcase full of these old papers that burned up. Boy, that's make you hurry. But I said, I can bring you out a 1903. And I said, in the middle page on that paper, because I was looking at it, Montgomery Ward was advertising their shoes. And it said, any pair of shoes on them pages for $1. Any pair for $1 a pair there was, see? Well, now, I said, let's take it. I said, Dad, that meant Dad worked all day for a pair of shoes. And I said, today, I said, you get about $35 a day, and the shoes are $80. So you work 2 days for a pair of shoes. Well, now, which is the better? I said, the old days or the new ones? Well, he said, when you say it that way, he said, I can see a difference there in that. Well, that's the truth. That's the way it was, see? But your dollars, you get a lot of dollars, but they don't buy nothing. You go out and you get a bag of groceries like that, and it's $10 for a little bag of groceries.
If you haven't got any meat in it.
And you ain't got no meat in it. That's right. And you say, where's the beef? Well, then, you go down to Port Lyden back in the good old days. I'd take the horse, and I'd we had a bob, and just one bob, and we had a box built on that bob. We'd take the horses down to port. And you leave early in the morning, of course, so you get back the same night, you know. You want to be sure to get back, because it gets dark early in the winter time, and it stays dark quite a while in the morning. Well, anyway, you go down there to Fraser's store, and we'd put in a sack of flour, you know, where we dealt to drakes and different ones. And you put a whole sack of flour in, 25-pound sack of flour, because Mother would cook, and she'd have, you know, all the stuff to cook with, baking powder and all that. It'd be all wrote down what she wanted, say, on the thing. And we'd buy meat, you know. We'd buy a lot of meat, maybe salt pork and different things that you'd buy in the line of meat. And we'd buy all those groceries, and you'd pile that box right full. And that box was probably 3.5 foot wide and probably 8 foot long, and the side box out like that. So you'd have quite a bunch of groceries there, probably 20 of them bags that you'd have today, or 25 of them at least. $15, and you went home. That bag of groceries would be $15, and today it'd be $300-400 for that same.
Oh yeah.
Or more.
Yeah, you probably pay. The eggs were 10 cents a dozen. Of course, we had our own eggs. We had chickens and eggs. And I said, you know, there's another thing. When we'd kill a hen or a chicken, you never saw that black meat along the bones. Today, you get a chicken and half of it is black meat and the rest of it is bones, and you get just a little piece of meat between. Yeah, it's an awful thing, though, the way that we get robbed. You go in and you have a meal, and if it's a good, ordinary, sensible, sociable, heavy meal, it'll cost you $7-8, you know. And that's half enough to fill that box. You and him eat together, and you'd have all that box of groceries. Well, I'll tell you, it's an awful thing. But I said, those were the good old days. And Charlie, he said, I said, what's the good do you? I said, if you get sick and you go somewhere, I don't care if you got a saving, $400,000, it'll take it in a week's time if you go to a hospital or something like that. I went to the hospital a while ago to St. Joe's in Syracuse. And I had, what they call it, a heart...
Bypass?
No. Catheterized. Catheterized heart. And of course, they just numb the leg, you know, there, and make a little cut about that long, and they slip that in the artery, and then that goes up the artery to the heart. See, and they look the heart all over to see if everything's all right in there. And you lay there and you watch it on the screen. So you can see it on there. I watched him poking around the heart there. And everything was perfect. There's nothing wrong around the heart. So I see the bill onto it.
And then there was something wrong, I bet.
I saw the bill. Yeah, the bill come here onto the thing. Just for the hospital. $3,200 for the hospital. I stayed 2 nights. See, I went down and I stayed